You will discover how a recent movement from a rival in the NFC East has paved the way for us to finally hire a heavyweight candidate for defensive coordinator, and this may be our last chance to get it right. But it doesn't stop there. Let's dive into how our defense will look completely different next season, revealing which players might come in and transform our defensive unit into a dominant force. And there's more. You will understand how Deebo Samuel's free agency decision could define our entire offseason, and why this choice is much more complicated than it seems. Stay tuned until the end, because every detail is crucial for the future of the Commanders. And since you're here, leave your like so you don't miss any exclusive analysis. Everyone is eagerly waiting to see which direction the Washington Commanders will decide to take for their next defensive coordinator. The domino effect continues to happen in the league. As a fan who follows every move of the offseason, I know this is one of the most important decisions our team can make. The Commanders are just one of many teams looking for a new defensive coordinator, and the vacancies are starting to fill up, especially in our division, which increases the urgency. The Dallas Cowboys have let go of Matt Eberflus and needed to find a new defensive coordinator quickly. They just filled the position, and it wasn't a candidate that intrigued either team, which benefits us directly. Now, the Commanders can hire one of the top defensive coordinator candidates they've already interviewed if they want to, since the Cowboys are out of the running for this specific name. The Dallas Cowboys hire a new defensive coordinator, and this decision changes the landscape. There are many excellent defensive coordinator vacancies in the league, and teams will compete for the best available candidates on the market. The Cowboys decided to hire Christian Parker, the defensive pass game coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, and have pulled out of the market for any other candidates they were considering. This significantly impacts the Commanders because the Cowboys were heavily linked to Jonathan Gannon, who was recently interviewed by Washington. We don't know where Gannon stands on the Commanders list, but hiring him just became much easier now that we have less competition. As a fan, this gives me hope that we might finally land someone of quality. The Commanders could hire Jonathan Gannon as the next defensive coordinator, and that would be an excellent choice. We haven't heard of any interest from the Commanders in Gannon since the interview with him, but they can always change their minds and consider him a serious candidate. They have already lost Jeff Ulbrich and had Brian Flores turned down, so they've had to expand their search and consider other options. The Cowboys have been pointed out by national media as one of Gannon's top destinations, but that is no longer a relevant factor now that they hired Parker. Other teams are also keeping an eye on Gannon, and the Green Bay Packers are interviewing him, so we still have competition. The Packers are already pushing to hire Al Harris, so their decision could ultimately determine the Commanders' final choice. Other pieces of the domino in the league are still falling into place, which could put the Commanders in a waiting situation, but they need to narrow down their options and define who they want to bolster the defense. They may wait for a candidate still in the playoffs, like Carl Scott, or they could opt for a candidate they already know and fill the position quickly. Gannon is one of the top candidates available, with experience in running a defense and calling plays, and this could be a significant advantage for Quinn. As a fan, I believe we need someone with proven experience, and Gannon fits that profile perfectly. The time to act is now, before we miss out on this opportunity. And now, get ready to understand how our defense will look completely different next season. You'll discover which players might come in and transform our defensive unit into a dominant force, and why this overhaul is absolutely necessary for our future success. The Washington Commanders defense is undergoing a complete overhaul this preseason, and as a fan, I think it's about time. The team needs reinforcements after the dismissal of defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. and the departure of several veterans to free agency. The first step of the preseason for the Commanders is to define who will lead the unit, and that decision will dictate everything else. Coach Dan Quinn took over play calling from Joe Witt Jr. in the last 7 games, but his preference in the past was to have someone else running the defense. Witt, hired in 2024, had no previous experience calling plays, so it's possible Washington wants someone who has done that in the past, wrote ESPN journalist John Keim, and this analysis makes perfect sense. The Commanders need to define a new defensive identity that is sustainable. Once the Commanders hire their defensive coordinator, the team will be able to determine what types of players can be brought on board and what tactical system will be implemented. Add impact players to the defense. Washington desperately needs them. Otherwise, simply changing coordinators won't yield a strong enough outcome. The Commanders need more speed and youth on their defensive line, as well as a starting cornerback and a starting safety, Keim wrote. And as a fan, I completely agree with this assessment. One player the Commanders might consider in the NFL draft is Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese, regarded as one of the top defensive prospects in the upcoming draft class. Bolstering the defensive line will be a key need for Washington, especially with linebacker Bobby Wagner, set to become a free agent at 36 years old. Arvell Reese from Ohio State would solve many issues in the middle of the defense, but some scouts believe he can act as a pass rusher in the NFL. This is another priority for Quinn's unit, wrote Keim. Reese may already be off the board by the time the Commanders pick at 7th overall, But there is a possibility the team will try to move up in the draft to select him if they have the necessary resources. As a fan, I would love to see this aggressive move from our front office. Another player that could make sense for them is Texas Tech pass rusher David Bailey, considered one of the best pass rushers in the class. Ultimately, Washington needs as many creative players as possible to join the team, both young and experienced. The combination of veteran talent with youth and athleticism will be crucial to transforming our defense from one of the worst to a competitive unit that can take us back to the playoffs. And now, to wrap up, let's dive into the crucial decision regarding Deebo Samuel. You'll understand how his choice about free agency could define our entire offseason, and why this decision is much more complicated than it seems at first glance. The Washington Commanders will enter the free agent market with a major decision to make regarding wide receiver Deebo Samuel, and that choice is keeping me awake at night. Samuel was acquired in a trade with the San Francisco 49ers nearly a year ago, but the results have not been what Washington expected, considering all the circumstances. After reaching the NFC Championship last year, the team has struggled and won only 5 games in 2025. Now, the Commanders face a tough decision regarding Samuel, who is in free agency and will likely receive offers from multiple teams. The Commanders are pleased with the acquisition of Samuel, who recorded 72 receptions for 727 yards this season, the best performance on the team. But he turns 30 in January, and keeping him on the roster could be expensive, wrote Jeremy Fowler, an ESPN analyst. Samuel's free agency should intrigue the Commanders in various ways. The Commanders brought in Samuel to be the second receiver behind Terry McLaurin, who signed a long-term contract extension with the team during training camp. The problem is that McLaurin has not fully recovered this season due to lingering injuries. He dealt with a thigh injury for most of the year, and Samuel effectively became the number 1 receiver in the offense, taking on a larger responsibility than initially planned. Additionally, quarterback Jaden Daniels was also dealing with injuries and was sidelined for most of the year, preventing us from seeing the true potential of our offense with everyone healthy. Therefore, the vision that general manager Adam Peters had before the season started could not come to fruition, and now we need to decide if it's worth investing in Samuel. The Commanders owe it to themselves to consider giving Samuel another chance with everyone healthy, but he will have several teams interested in him in free agency, some of which would offer a considerable amount of money. The Commanders need to decide for themselves if Samuel is worth that price, considering his age and the fact that we have other urgent needs on the roster. As a fan, I see valid arguments on both sides of this discussion. The Commanders likely already have a figure in mind to pay Samuel next season, but there may be other cheaper alternatives. This would lead Washington to consider a different direction, potentially investing in younger receivers through the draft or cheaper free agents. It's a decision that will define not only our offense, but the entire structure of our offseason, as the money we spend or save on Samuel will directly impact other areas of the roster that need urgent reinforcements. So, fans, after hearing about the opportunity to hire Jonathan Gannon now that the Cowboys are out of contention, discovering how our defense will be completely revamped with possible additions like Arvell Reese or David Bailey, and understanding the complex decision regarding Deebo Samuel, which of these 3 situations do you believe will have the greatest impact on the success of the Commanders in 2026? Do you think we should invest heavily in Samuel and give him another chance? Or would it be smarter to let him go and use that money to strengthen multiple positions in the defense? And more importantly, do you trust that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters will make the right decisions in these crucial upcoming weeks? Or do you still have doubts about their ability to build a winning team? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think about the future of the Washington Commanders.